So how do you go about researching the history of a vehicle that is a barn find and maybe getting a title for the vehicle if one is not available when you purchase the vehicle? A barn find or a vehicle that's been off the road for a long time, in addition to having problems with getting the condition of the vehicle back up to snuff, it might need a full restoration job. Some high-end vehicles get a full rotisserie rehab of the vehicle, all new parts, all reconditioned parts. But the bigger problem is if you purchased a vehicle from somebody who maybe didn't know the origin of it, or maybe it's been sitting in a family property for 20, 30, 40 years, the legal title documents may not be readily available when you purchase the vehicle. So how do you go about getting a new legal title document for your ownership so that your investment is secured and you're not putting money into a vehicle that legally you don't own? Because until you have a legal title document in your hands with your name printed on it from the government, technically you can't prove your ownership. A bill of sale is just one first step in getting the title, but by itself the DMV is not going to give you a title with just a bill of sale. So how do you go about doing it? Well, the first thing you may want to do is some research on the vehicle. You want to initially identify the vehicle using the VIN number, so you know which vehicle it is. Here's an example of a VIN number. You may have to dig up some trim work or carpet to find a VIN number. Sometimes it'll be rusted or scratched out. The most important thing is identifying the actual VIN number of the vehicle that you want to get a title for, because if for some reason there are no VIN numbers on the vehicle, that's going to create a problem. Or if there's more than one different VIN number on the vehicle, that's going to create a problem. Now, prior to 1981, vehicle identification numbers were not standardized. They could have any number of digits. They could be in multiple locations on the vehicle. The farther back, the older you go, the less likely the VIN number was going to be in a standard place. In 1981, the federal government required that all vehicles had a 17-digit VIN number that was standardized in terms of its format. The first letter was indication of the country of origin, so 1 would have been U.S., J would have been Japan, and so on. The second character is the manufacturer. So JT1 is Japan, Toyota, and then 1 is the model number. Or 1G2 is US for 1, G for General Motors, and so on. So prior to that, the vehicle identification number, which is any number the manufacturer decided to make up. And in the 60s and 70s, there was some rhyme or reason to it. Most of the time they put it under the hood. A lot of manufacturers started putting it on the cowl above the firewall behind the windshield, even into the 70s. So it was in one place, or stamped on the firewall, or on a plate like this one. You can see this VIN plate here from an older Chevrolet. The problem is, in theory, Chevrolet could have made this vehicle 138177, and Ford could make another vehicle with the same VIN number, because there was no standardization, although that rarely happened. If you go back to the 1940s and 50s, the serial numbers or VIN numbers became a little bit more vague. You may find them in different places, sometimes on the fender well. Well, if it's on the fender well, what happens if the car's in an accident and the inner fender well gets damaged? You have to replace it. Well, that's the whole car identification, is that VIN number. If it's a VIN tag like this one, you see it has these rivets. These rivets are tamper resistant, because if it was just easy to switch a VIN from one car to another, then anybody could just steal a car and take a VIN number for another car and slap it on the stolen car. So even before 1981, there was some standardization of VIN number attachments so that you couldn't just steal a car and slap another VIN number on it. So first, identify your vehicle. And that's obviously the middle word of the acronym VIN, Vehicle Identification Number. You're identifying that particular vehicle. So it's unlike any other vehicle. Once you've established the VIN number and found where that legal serial number is, now you want to start looking at, what are my options for getting a title? Did the prior owner that sold you the vehicle have any records? Is there insurance records? Is there registration in the vehicle? Are there any original purchase documents in the glove compartment. A lot of times this will also help you with provenance if you're looking to sell it at an auction or sell it to an investor. If you have any of those initial documents, you can sometimes follow a chain of title to other owners. However, that's still not going to get you a title in your name directly, but it might put you on the right pathway. Sometimes classic car owners also want to find out about prior owners just for curiosity. What happened with the vehicle, what's your story, and there may be ways to do that. The other thing you can do is you can run a consumer grade VIN search. And by consumer grade, I mean there's a dozen websites online that for $5 or $10 or $20 or $30 will say they'll do a VIN search. These VIN searches are a lot less useful than you might think they are. It's kind of like a Carfax where they'll say, look, this vehicle has an insurance claim history or not, and maybe here's the last date it was titled in. That's all it's going to give you. It's not going to tell you anything about the owner's name or the identity of prior owners, even though the website descriptions on a lot of these VIN searches kind of are optimistic and kind of, prey on the belief that you might get more than you really are. But you're not going to get too much. So you can do a VIN search, but that might tell you the state at least it was registered in. Once you know the state, you can then do a request for prior owner information from that state. It's called a DPPA request, Driver's Privacy Protection Act. That's a federal law that was passed in the 90s that prohibits anyone, including the DMV, from revealing or releasing identities of owners based on a vehicle. And here's the reason they did that. Let's suppose you're driving and turn right into a parking lot and accidentally cut somebody off. And they don't like the way you cut them off. Maybe they're mad at you. Or maybe write down your license plate. Maybe they even see where you park and write down your VIN number from your dashboard. And they go to DMV and say, tell me who owns this car. And they say, hey, Joe Schmo, he lives at 12 Main Street. Now here's this guy knocking on your door wanting to yell at you for cutting him off, or worse. So in the 90s, they passed a law saying, no, you can't do that at the DMV. And anybody who has those records, insurance companies, title companies, investigators, even if you have the information, you can't release it. As a licensed investigative agency, we're allowed to look up prior owner information for certain purposes. Can't release it to third parties, but we can use it for notifications and contacts. Now, you as a civilian may be allowed to get that information. If you fill out a DPPA request form for the state where the title was last issued, you can't do it anywhere. It has to go to the state where the last records were, because they're the only place that's going to know about the owner. And you have to sign an affidavit saying, look, here's my permissible use, here's what I'm going to use it for, I'm not going to try to do any stalking, identity theft, anything nefarious. And you submit it, and they may accept your request and tell you, look, here's the name and address of who we have on record as the owner. Now, that information might be old. It might be the name and address who had it registered in 1985. They may have moved since then. They may have died since then, but at least you have a starting point. And then you can do a background check on that person to see, okay, they lived here, but now, 20 years later, here's where they live now. But then you have to ask, what are you going to do with that information? If you want to have that person try and help you get a title, maybe a way to go, but you don't want to do it by just calling them up or sending them a text message or hitting them up on Facebook, because you got to think about it. Here's a person who hasn't owned this car in 5, 10, 15 years. If it's a barn find, it's going to be at least that long. And somebody's contacting them out of the blue about some vehicle they used to have. They might think it's a scam. They might think it's a fraud, one of these warranty extension things. Who knows what they're going to think? But they're probably just going to block you, right? So what we recommend doing, and here's how we do it, send them a letter by postal mail in an envelope. In that envelope, include a lost title request form that you want them to sign. Don't tell them, hey, get me another title, because now you're making them do work. Or if you want information from them, hey, I have this car I used to own, I'd be interested to know your history of the car. How long did you have it? Anything would be helpful. And sometimes people will reply. They don't have to. Remember, they're not under any obligation to help you out. So you can try that first, and you'll see on our website, cartitles.com, we have a more detailed explanation of how to contact prior owners. based on the VIN number, and if you want to pursue that, you can. We give you instructions on how to do it yourself, or an option if you want to have us do it. Now, what happens if the prior owner's not around, or they can't get another title, or they won't do it? Well, then what do you do? Well, most states have a process that's called a bonded title. Here's an example on the screen: Motor Vehicle Certificate of Title Bond, where you can go through a process with the state to sign some affidavits, get a surety bond certificate like this one from a bonding company, probably cost you about $100, and you submit that package to the state, and they will issue you a bonded title for that vehicle. And what the bonded title means is that it'll reference on the title that this title was not obtained by having the prior proper title. It was obtained through this bonding process. And that indication will remain on the title for usually about 3 years in most states. Some states go to 5 years if it's a high-end vehicle. And then it automatically disappears and your title is normal. So that's an option. Even if your state does not recognize or issue bonded titles, there may be a way to do this in another state, and you can contact us about that. If the vehicle is older than 15 years old, which on a barn find it probably is, you have another option, and that is the famous Vermont loophole. And here's an article from Jalopnik, which is a very prominent classic car publication. You've also seen it mentioned on Haggerty Insurance, where it talks about title breakdown. Vermont doesn't title vehicles that are more than 15 years. Vermont titling only vehicles 2006 or newer. What that means is the registration is proof of ownership and functions as a title. So what that allows you to do is you can apply by mail to the state of Vermont to get a registration to make the vehicle legal. Okay? And you fill out some forms, write a check, wait about a month. It's really a little bit less than that now. And you get a title. Well, you really don't get a title. You get a registration. However, since that registration functions as a title, once you receive it, you can then bring it to your state to exchange for a title. You don't want to put these Vermont license plates on your vehicle and drive around with them in your state, because even though technically the registration is valid, if you're a resident of another state, let's say Ohio, and you're driving around with Vermont plates, you're breaking an Ohio law that says if you are a resident of this state, you have to have license plates from the state. But you can get the registration from Vermont, use it as a proof of ownership, bring it to your state to exchange for a title. And every state's supposed to do this. Most states do it. Occasionally you run into a little hassle with a particular agent at the DMV that says, wait a minute, this isn't a title, but there's some forms you can attach to it from the Vermont DMV on the letterhead that explains that the registration is their version of a title, and that should move you along. So that's another option that you have to get a title for a barn find, is the infamous Vermont loophole, and you can find information about that on our website, cartitles.com. Third option is you could do a court-ordered title. And a court-ordered title is where you go to the court in the county where you reside and file a case with the county court to have a judge declare you to be the owner of the vehicle by court order. And the court of common pleas in each county, this happens to be Ohio, but every state has something similar. In a limited number of circumstances, a judge can order the title division to issue a motor vehicle title. These circumstances include when the original title has been lost, destroyed, or stolen. Well, with a barn find, that's really what happened, right? When you have purchased a vehicle and the previous owner has failed or otherwise been unable to purchase you or furnish you with a properly assigned title. So that is another scenario for a barn find. So if you have a vehicle that's a barn find, that you have proper documentation, you have a bill of sale, you have a good story, and you don't want to go through the bonded title process or this Vermont process, you can do a court order process. Now, what's the advantage of a court order process? Well, the advantage is it's a lot cheaper. You can probably pay $40 or $50 worth of filing fees and go through the court process. The downside is, first of all, it's going to take some time. You're going to have to go to court probably 3 or 4 times, and it might take 5 or 6 months. But if you're not rushed for time, that might not be a problem. The other difficulty is there's a lot of tricky paperwork you have to fill out at first to apply to the court. Unlike a form like this, it's like fill in the blanks, right? You see this motor vehicle title bond. You just fill in the blanks. The court order title doesn't have a fill in the blanks form. You have to start with a blank sheet of paper and type in a court complaint or a court petition. We have on our website some samples of that. The problem is every county is different. There are 3,611 counties across the country. Every one is slightly different in terms of, do they want it single space, double space, how wide are the margins, and that kind of thing. And the bigger problem is the court cannot tell you how to do it. You can't get legal advice from the court. So what we recommend doing is finding another court case in that county. It has nothing to do with you. Look at the format of how that case goes, and then use it as an example of how to make up your petition. The wording for a court order title, we have some examples on our website at cartitles.com. We even have a service where if you want, we'll type up an attempt at a court order petition. We're not attorneys, we're not giving you legal advice, but if you give us your VIN number, your name and address, and your county, we'll plug that in to a document merge to produce an example of what a court order petition might look like. If you bring it to the court, even if it's wrong, at least now they can tell you, fix this, this, and this. If you come in empty-handed, they probably can't do anything. So more than likely, the example you bring in is probably going to be wrong. It's not going to work. But at least it'll give you a starting point that court can say, well, you're pretty close, and they'll change these few things and you'll be good. Or you can just hire an attorney to do it, but now you're going to spend thousands on an attorney. So a barn find is a very valuable method of discovering rare vehicles that are not in common circulation. However, in addition to spending time rehabbing, reconstructing, and completely upgrading the vehicle, you may have to spend some time and effort also rehabbing the title if you don't have the right title document. As always, you can get more information at cartitles.com. If you have questions, you can call us up, or we have a help desk. Help@cartitles.com is the email, and we'll be glad to be of assistance.